Hi everyone, I'm Mike Abadi and welcome to VTblogosphereTV. It's episode 45. We've had a 4.5-year run and we're having a little bit of a retirement party, a celebration of the strength of the blogosphere and the movement of this country into a more progressive direction. We just had ourselves quite an election, John. Mr. John Odum is the founder of Green Mountain Daily, a man who was sort of central to building the architecture of the Vermont blogosphere. And we all have much gratitude for that, John.
I'm glad some do.
Last town meeting day, though, your role changed.
Yep. I'm retired from blogs. I have been since March.
So we got a couple old men here retiring. So you are now the city clerk of the capital city of Montpelier, Vermont.
That's right. I have stepped out of partisan sides and in battles, and I'm still very much an election observer, obviously, but now I'm a participant in a different way. So,
now, especially on election night, what all did your election night look like as the city clerk? What was your job? What did you have to get done by when, and who did you need to?
Well, you have to remember when you're a clerk, election night essentially starts a month before, because that's when the ballot requests come. Well, the ballot requests come in much earlier, but that's when really the ballots start coming in. So, for weeks beforehand, gradually it got to where the clerk's office, the clerk's staff was doing nothing but processing early votes, people coming in to vote, getting ballots, and so it had been going on for some time. Election day itself is a big thing. It's a citywide event that you're putting on for the whole town, where most of the folks in the town are going to show up. It had certainly been done before I'd gotten there, and I looked at past elections. Had a staff there that had been through it before, had volunteers who'd been through it before, had gone through a miniature version of it myself with the primary election. But having said that, we were completely unprepared for the crowd at the beginning of the day. It was things did not run smoothly for the first couple hours. Before we even opened the doors, up there in the second floor of the City Hall auditorium, for those who don't know. And it's a pretty good-sized City Hall we have in Montpelier. The building's full. The line stretched down stairs, both sides of the stairs, through the entire building and outside before we even opened the doors.
This is 8 or 7?
7.
7, wow.
So the system we had just couldn't deal with the logjam. We opened up and people had to wait, even 30, 40 minutes for those first couple hours. It was not fun. We had to pull out, almost immediately had to pull out my backup voting machine, which I kept off-site in case there was a problem or a power surge or something, so we could, seamlessly continue the election. We had to bring that one in and put it into play, and I think they've used 2 voting machines at the same time for 12 years.
Wow.
And that slowly started taking the edge off. But between that and a bunch of issues with jamming because of the size of the ballot, it was a challenge.
Whew.
After, I'd say by the time we got to about 10 o'clock, the lines had gotten reasonable. They'd come and go. They were never too terribly long, and people didn't have to wait too bad. But that first couple hours was, there was just nothing to do other than just try to get through it. I'm sitting there with my key next to the voting machines. Anytime something jams up, I'm like, okay.
Wow,
It was very stressful.
That really speaks to a level of engagement. The people were just chomping at the bit to get in there.
Well, yeah.
First thing.
Yeah,
And
true.
You got another rush at after work time?
That first rush was so big that it was truly a disproportionate percentage of the town. We were moving through, hundreds an hour. So there was never another rush like that for the rest of the day. I mean, we had moments where, the amounts would go up, like around lunch and towards the end of the day, but, by the end of the day, we were simply running out of voters who were likely to come out. So, no, it was really front-ended, really heavily front-ended, and then pretty steady the rest of the day.
Wow. And then there was the early mail-in vote. Do you have a sense at what sort of percentage that's at now? The percent of the vote is actually not on election day as previous
election day.
election.
Well, for us, let me see if I can do that real quick. Well, for us, it was, I'd say, a little bit more than a quarter.
More than a quarter, wow.
Yeah, it was probably closer to a third, which is actually down from 4 years ago. 4 years ago, it was a little above a third. More folks doing that. And one of the things I think, there are a lot of things to try to make to keep that kind of logjam from happening again, because that's the key.
Yeah.
Once you have the logjam, there's, you're kind of stuck with it for a while.
Right.
But one thing I might want to do, other than maybe get an extra voting machine, this kind of thing, but also open up that weekend before and allow for more early voting hours, and try to take some of the pressure off that way.
Would that require any kind of state law change, or you were it's fully within your
scope of my office? Yeah,
great.
Just get the word out.
Great. So people are, a significant number of people are leaving kind of the ritual of election day and not so invested in that that exciting day of. I still have that the day of.
Oh, me
and
too.
the ritual of going on the day, but I guess avoiding a line is also.
Well, nobody likes lines, but people also don't like the carnival outside with the signs and I love that. I mean, like I said, it's sort of carnival-esque. It
right.
feels very, but I can certainly see why people don't want to deal with it.
I would think that in your role on the just most nuts and bolts level of the election, it must be quite an antidote to cynicism. Sort of, you get this sort of national noise about super PACs and polls and blah, 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 and then we've got the town of Montpelier, where individuals go into the voting booth, make decisions, and you get to figure out how it all shook out.
I think all clerks probably have that experience. I mean, this is the romantic part of the job. Dog licenses are fine, but it's not very romantic. This is great.
So on top of getting the election running up and running, you get dog license, marriages licenses.
Yeah.
What is just the city clerk job broadly is describe?
We keep all the land records and everything associated with that. We keep the grand list. We keep, I'm essentially the secretary for the city council. Mm-hmm. We do all the licensing in town, dog licensing, whatever business licensing there is. The marriage licenses. We keep the vital records, records of birth, death, marriages, things like that.
Okay.
That's the bulk of it. I'm also there helping with the the treasurer functions, which have been divided now just recently. I'm the first just clean Montpelier city clerk. In the past, it had been city clerk treasurer, but that just with the town this size and this complex, that was just too much. So those positions have been split. Treasurer is now appointed. But I'm still in the same office with a lot of the treasurer staff, so that means I'm there to help out with things like processing tax and water and sewer payments, things like that.
Okay, so it was actually a double job. It was actually city clerk, treasurer.
Yeah, and I think most towns still do it that way, but once you get past a certain sort of critical mass of complexity in a town, I think it just becomes impractical. There's also concerns, more concerns about, whether you, in some cases, in some towns, an elected treasurer, just somebody who gets enough votes and you hand them the town checkbook, they haven't always been responsible with it. So it makes a certain amount of sense, I think, to fold that more formally into the into the finance department.
A treasurer may not be a job you want to put up to a vote, and maybe actually look at their resume and say, can they actually do this?
Exactly.
Do this job. So you do a vote count deep into the evening. How'd that all go?
Oh, it actually went pretty well. It was a little longer than I would have liked because just the amount of ballots sort of swamped the system we had, where it was automatically separating out the ones that had write-ins. Mm-hmm. So we had to, the justice of the peace who were there, and folks helping out had to actually manually go through the ballots to look for the write-ins because that dividing in there was just swamped. So more ballot boxes for the machines is also on my list to keep that from happening. But it wasn't too bad. I got home at midnight. And
then you, what do you phone it into the Secretary of State? When's it officially stamped with? How's the closing out of that?
Officially, the official return of votes isn't due for a day and a half afterwards. But there's a push to try to get that official tally in the evening of, and there's a lot of controversy around that. So there's an electronic system up there that into which I put my returns on election night, even though it wasn't the official return. So that stuff was at the Secretary of State's office in that evening, although I know it didn't appear on the Secretary of State's website because I got some annoyed phone calls from people wondering where it was. I don't know. They've got it.
Okay. Any surprises on the local level?
No.
No, it's pretty.
No. I mean, we only had one local question, which was about a tweak to the redistricting tweak to the city council districts, which passed overwhelmingly because it was just a technical tweak that only affected a handful of residents.
Okay. And then moving on to the state level, pretty much, well, a bit of stasis, I guess. Shumlin handily 67% of the vote. And Phil Scott, probably as high. Actually, you know what I think? Is it Gakis, Cassandra Gakis? I think she did better than Randy Brock. I think Randy
well, she got more votes than Randy Brock.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah.
If you compare the two underdogs there in the two top positions, it looked like Gakis did pick up, I guess, a little more than the hardcore Democratic base. It looked like Brock really only just held the hardcore Republican base.
Yeah, and that obviously that percentage was a little bit lower than it is in some cases. I mean, I think some elections you see that hardcore Republican base. You know, you can chart it coming in at like 41 or 42%.
Breaking 40.
But in an election year, big turnout year, lots of new voters who were registering just to vote for Obama.
Right.
That as a percentage, even if the numbers didn't change that much, as a percentage, that floor was a lot lower.
I think the most gratifying race for me at the state level was the state auditor accounts. The Salmon era is over, and Doug Hoffer handily won. It wasn't really that close.
No, it wasn't. And I'll obviously my town clerk hats off on this, and I'm just sort of political observer guy.
Right there.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like he was going to win, but I wasn't confident of it. And I was delighted to see the margin. There was such a drumbeat of Hoffer's going to lose, Hoffer's no good. And then those
big paper endorsements.
Yeah, and the endorsements, which, as John Walters has talked a lot about on Green Mountain Daily, were the mirror of the endorsements from 2 years ago when Hoffer got all these endorsements over Tom Salmon
as the challenger. Right?
And yeah, I mean, who are you going to endorse Tom Salmon? I mean, he was seemed like a sketchy.
Talking about the Senate, talking about this, talking about that.
He was problematic. He wasn't focused on the job. He seemed to be kind of a loose cannon. So they weren't gonna endorse him. They endorsed Hoffer, but in the process they really talked him up about what a great candidate he was.
Right.
This time, when most of them, virtually everybody endorsed Aluzzi, it wasn't just an endorsement of Aluzzi. It was often talking about what a poor candidate Hoffer was, and for some of the same reasons that they thought he was a good candidate 2 years ago. So that was, was, I think, well chronicled on GMD, and I appreciated reading that.
Numbers guy, unbeholden to anybody. That's great in 1 year, and then the next.
But the thing is, those endorsements matter. They really do. A lot of people don't pay that much attention, and they look at the endorsement, and they consciously or no, lean that way. So I thought, he may pull this out, he may not, but those endorsements I thought really hurt. And when the dust settled, it turned out they didn't hurt at all.
Right.
It seemed to make any difference whatsoever.
Yeah, there also seems to, Vermont does have its, tiny little punditocracy, and that closed group seems to think everyone in the state knows Vince Aluzzi.
Well, that bubble thing, yeah. I mean, I used to talk a lot about that when I was on GMD, of, all you have to do. And in fact, that was part of the strength of GMD. It's not like we have, we had tens of thousands of people reading us, but we managed to get into that bubble just enough to get into that network. So, so our own, I think, voice became disproportionate to our numbers the same way, I guess, somebody like Vince Aluzzi's does, in a sense, although he was actually in there. But still, you get into that bubble, you get into that echo chamber, and
Yeah.
You know, and we managed to get our way in there, so
right.
you know, it had a big impact on the impact we had. But you're absolutely right. It was an echo chamber conclusion. It wasn't.
Anyone I would talk to that was not a political junkie would say who to either Hoffer or Luzzi. That name, I mean, neither name is really. Actually, Hoffer had run a statewide race, so if anything, that may click into people's minds. And then I guess the conclusion being the same punditocracy, that it was really Hoffer not having an R next to his name that got him the race. Whereas I actually think maybe, just maybe, people took not a deep, but even a cursory glance of the two candidates' resumes. Hoffer just, who would you hire for that job? Just seemed to be an easy call.
Well, I think you go down the list of different things that different people did. I mean, one thing when we do any kind of election post-mortem, everyone always wants to get out there with the headline of this is what happened. No, this is what happened.
Yeah.
Here's the key. Here's the narrative. Here's the moral of the story.
Right. It's got to have an ending.
But the fact is, you know, usually when people are doing that, they've all got a piece of it. And all this stuff was in play because there's a lot of people out there. They come from a lot of different places. They think a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So there's some people over here, they did look at the resumes. Some people over here, they did just vote D. You know, all of this stuff. But the thing is, all those little bits, you know, some people, they did just sort of remember his name from before.
Right.
The thing is, all those little pieces of the story all seem to line up Hoffer's way. They were all his. So the aggregate was a very strong victory.
Yeah. And the, I don't know, the ever-shrinking newspapers, I guess, again, humbled by their endorsements, not meaning too much.
No, they don't get too humbled. Huh? They just pick themselves up. And,
That's right.
That's all right.
Shrink the paper and
in fairness, you got to have thick skin to be in the newspaper business, I think. So.
Yeah. Do you miss being in the quote-unquote online newspaper business, being an active participant in GMDs?
Often. I think anyone who was reading me in the last few months could see that I was really burned out and just cranking it out.
This would be late 2011 and before you became city clerk.
Yeah, I mean, I was writing up, you know, in January and February of this year, and so there was a surprisingly long period of time there where I just felt good that I wasn't concerned.
You needed to decompress.
Yeah, especially since, you know, I had recruited John Walters to help, you know, pick up. And boy, he's been very prolific.
Right.
And so seeing that there's steady content and, you know, some of the stuff that I tend to focus on a little bit more, he's found himself focusing on, so that some of those qualities are still there. All of it, everything that we were focusing on while I was there is still being focused on. So that also let me relax. Now, you know, since then in the last few months, especially in election season, which is always my favorite to comment, not as much in a partisan way, because I used to just like to talk about the nuts and bolts. I used to talk about, you know, who's being smart, who isn't, whatever, you know, do the whole sort of mojo meter thing, and just regardless of ideology, just what's happening and what's working and what isn't.
Yeah.
And, so I missed that. I did miss that. Now the election's over, maybe I'll just go back to being grateful I'm not in it.
Nice. The State House is a tad more Democratic coming in.
A couple more. They lost a couple and picked up 4 or 5. A couple races that people were really watching went their way. You know, Sarah Buxton.
Yeah, the one vote.
One vote, which was now quite a bit more than one vote.
Yeah.
So she was in solidly, and I imagine she's going to own that seat for as long as she wants.
Right.
I mean, it seems like the constituents there
We're
not
down
just
in the
comfortable with her. They seem
Royalton
quite
area.
happy with her, you know?
Yeah, she stepped up during Irene, and as the whole, you know, as the whole state did. I mean.
Yeah, and you know, I think I've gotten to know her. Sarah's just a really, really likable person. So you know, she's competent. She's doing her job, and you like her.
Roots with Dean? Where's her roots? She's got some.
You mean as far as political involvement?
Yeah.
She worked on the Dean campaign for president for a while. She was really an early person, an early confidant, I think. So.
Right. What's this legislature got to do here? They got this whole health care system to build,
right? Which they can really start building. Well, I mean, they've already started building, but I think you know, a lot of questions were going to depend on the outcome of the presidential election, which you know, Obamacare is still going to be the law of the land, so they can move forward. Although I think there is still going to be a while before we get any kind of costs. I don't think we're going to be hearing that this next session. But you know, it's time to start building the exchange.
Sure.
So costs will be an issue. The budget is going to be an issue. I forget what the shortfall is. It's not quite as cataclysmic as I think it's been in previous years, but there is still a budget shortfall, okay. So that's still going to be a concern. There's still going to be pretty uniform resistance, even given the sort of national zeitgeist. I think you're going to see Shumlin still, you know, uniformly against any kind of revenue increases.
Sure, sure.
Or at least anything that could even be vaguely called a tax increase.
Right.
So we're going to be looking at more cuts again, I suspect, and I'm not sure where that's going to come from. Now, you've got a more empowered, I think a more empowered and a more confident liberal majority among within the Democratic caucus. So there could be different dynamic, protecting some programs and creating some priorities.
Potentially state Senate leadership in flux.
Yeah, now that's interesting. I don't know how that's going to go. I mean, the opinions about Campbell within the caucus that I've been able to, you know, I'm sort of out of the loop now, but when I wasn't out of the loop, were an interesting mix. A lot of it was just that, you know, nobody else really wanted that job. And they thought he was competent at it, he could do it, he wanted it, you know, let him have it. But now you've got Ann Cummings, who wants it, and, you know, she's certainly been there a while. You've got some people, I think, who are going to vote for anybody but Campbell. You know, I imagine, you know, folks like Polina and obviously Zuckerman, who got snubbed by him, and, you know, probably folks like Baruth. And,
right.
So it's, yeah, it could go either way.
Right. And then Campbell came in as really trying to fill the vacuum left by Shumlin when he took the governorship, who seemed to have the Senate just wired. I mean, overriding vetoes back in the day.
Well, Shumlin kept tight control of the Senate, and he had a small inner circle. You know, Campbell, Aluzzi, and to an extent, Dick Sears. So Campbell, in that sense, was sort of a natural successor. He was one of these super senators, you know, Shumlin's super senators, the ones that really had his ear and really got their way. And that's, of course, where a lot of the speculation was that, you know, maybe Shumlin had tried to bring Aluzzi into the race for auditor so that he could have an ally in that position. You know, obviously he did endorse Hoffer, but he didn't go out and work for him. But there's a lot of buzz about that. And, but anyway, a loss for Campbell would certainly be the final nail in the coffin of that sort of tiny little cabal that includes, you know, I left out Dick Mazza, he's the other one.
Okay, so there may be some real change going on in the Senate. That'd be interesting.
Potentially.
Okay. With not terribly much time, we better get up there to the federal level. Geez, stasis election, change election?
Oh, it's a change election. Just by virtue that it did not change, it is changed. I mean, seriously, what's more phenomenal than anything is the Dems picking up 2 in the Senate, because they were just mathematically on the defense. All things being equal, they should have lost 3 or 4. If anybody had suggested that they would actually even break even, you know, even back in like August or September, you know, you would have looked at them like they were crazy. Yeah,
they were defending their 06 victories, which in places like Montana and Missouri and Virginia, and they real high water mark actually.
They picked up 2, which sure sets them up great for the next election, where the roles are not quite as dramatically, but to an extent reversed. They're going to be, you know, they'll be in a position mathematically to pick up even more, but then they'll also have that mid-year election incumbent party curse going on. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's an incumbent party. My concern is that we're going to have sort of a fully American election where the full electorate comes out and looks fully like America in the presidential years, but then we'll have these off-year elections where it's like the older, whiter, more Republican electorate comes out and people sit out, and we just have 2010 and 2014 again. I don't know. I mean, it seems like forces need to figure out a way to mobilize and underline how important those off-year elections are if you want anything replacing, looking at all like progress.
Anything that's not the 2 steps back.
Yeah, here we go.
I don't see that changing. I see, you know, they had a really good machine out there. It was really coordinated. It was really smart. There will be, you know, the edge will be taken off that. But is it going to be enough to turn the dynamic around? I doubt it. I doubt it. I mean, the right's core is a larger core than the left, even though I think in terms of the issues, the left, the center left is more where the country is. But you know, you get those folks turning out ever since the old Republican Revolution back in what was it, like '94? Yeah,
the Gingrich ascension.
When something like 1 out of every 4 voters in exit polls were identified as evangelical voters. Ever since then, that crowd always turns out, and they always will.
Yeah, yeah. So it looks like the House is a little more Democratic, but it's clearly in Republican hands.
Still a few question marks hanging out there, but
so I don't know if there's are there enough moderate Republicans in the House that the Democrats could maybe reach across and see if that body can function with a Democratic Senate? And I mean, I'm really
on a couple issues, but I think only on a couple issues. Especially since once they go out on those couple issues, there's going to be a blowback and they're going to want to prove their conservative bona fides. I mean, I think it's like everyone's saying, look for a compromise, something like the DREAM Act finally getting through. And as soon as they go out there and stick their necks out there to their base on that, then they're going to snap back on economics to hardcore to prove themselves again. So there'll be a couple shafts of light coming through, but in general, I think it's going to be more of the same.
Okay, okay. And then we had all those referenda that look like center-left country. How about left country?
Socially left.
Yeah.
Socially not center-left.
Yeah.
Socially left. Socially.
Yeah. That's still that libertarian streak that when you're on social issues, it's don't care who you're marrying, don't care what you're smoking.
Yeah, yeah. I think, you know, I think even, I mean, they talk about the idea of big government defining the left and the right, and it's not really true. Nobody likes big government. Yeah. The difference between the left and the right, of course, is that the left feels like the responsibilities of government are a bigger list. It's more than just the roads and the you know, and the military. Within the list that the left sees as their responsibility, they want it to be small. They want it to be as small and unobtrusive as possible. So that creates agreement among social issues. We can all agree that. Can't we all agree, except for the hardcore religious folks, that this big would be too big, regardless of what you think of economic policy?
Right, right, right. So you're reminding me of the O'Reilly's analysis that just half the country just wants stuff.
Yeah, right. After the last 4 years, coming out of a recession, they have learned that, oh, we have Obama in office, we get stuff. Nobody's getting any stuff. Nobody's getting anything. People are scratching by, and you know, that's
they like functioning government. I mean, it's nice to have competence.
They would
at the top.
I think they would like competence.
Yeah,
and I do think Americans still have a tendency, for good or ill, to vote for the person that they kind of like. And Obama's positives, you know, they're back above 50%, and Romney's positives never recovered from some of his I am an out-of-touch, super wealthy, exploitative, capitalist kind of guy.
Makers and takers.
Yeah, I mean, he just never recovered from that. So what did they do? They wanted the guy they liked.
Yeah. It's amazing they alienated so many people on so many levels. It felt like they were. I'm really surprised.
That's what they don't get when they talk about Reagan and why don't we have more Reagan-esque, Reagan-esque, Reagan-esque. Well, you know, the biggest thing about Reagan was that everybody liked him. He was likable. So you know, they're gonna have to realize they need likable candidates.
Yeah.
People liked George W. Bush when he first ran.
On some level.
They didn't like him so much the second time, but they really didn't like John Kerry.
Right. Right. All right. Thanks so much, John. Enjoy, well, policy year. We get to relax a little, hopefully. I'm not going to ask you your 2016 picks. And we are going to say goodnight to all for good.
Well, thanks for doing this for so many
Call
years.
It a retirement,
this has been great.
But there's plenty of fun to be had with public access television. So we'll see what comes up next. And sleep tight, America. Night-night.
Tonight, in this election, You, the American people, reminded us that while our road has been hard, while our journey has been long, we have picked ourselves up. We have fought our way back. And we know in our hearts that for the United States of America, the best is yet to come. I just spoke with Governor Romney, and I congratulated him and Paul Ryan.